Chapter 394. After a moment Noyce went upstairs and looked at Dudyan. "Master, someone has died. The chef who made the soup for you committed suicide by poison in the kitchen." "Poison?" Dudyan was surprised as he saw Noyce go upstairs alone. He narrowed his eyes. Investigate his identity and the people he has been in contact with. His family, his relatives, and so on. "Yes." Noyce turned away. Dean looked at the hot soup on the desk. His eyes were cold. He didn't expect that the Melon Consortium would provoke other forces before he could eradicate them. Moreover, the other forces were much stronger than the Melon Consortium. Among the 6 consortia, only the Scott Consortium had such information. However, the Scott Consortium had no reason to deal with him. If it wasn't the Scott Consortium, then it could be the Dark Church or the military. If one were to weigh the pros and cons, then the biggest suspect would be the Dark Church. Could it be that he had provoked the Dark Church by creating a new legendary divine incantation? The people who were sent to the military to assassinate me weren't from the same group. They didn't cooperate with each other. They should be sent by 2 parties. One of them is most likely the Melon Consortium, but the other one is likely to be the one who poisoned me. Dean's eyes flashed as his heart turned cold. The enemy was in the dark while he was in the light. It was impossible to prevent an assassination. Even if his physique was several times stronger, he would die immediately if he took some highly toxic drug. Moreover, according to his understanding in the temple, many highly toxic drugs didn't even have an odor. Moreover, it was difficult to detect them using ordinary method. The so-called assassination was to use the strength of a strand of hair to kill a person as strong as a bull. This was the charm of assassination. He once used assassination to kill Deacon Huey, but he didn't expect to become someone else's prey. In this hunting jungle, I want to see who is the king. Dean slightly rubbed his fingers. A trace of deep cold light flashed in his eyes. The heavy rain was falling outside the window. The heat from the hot soup was visible to the naked eye. After bandaging his left hand, Dean got up and went downstairs. He went to the kitchen and drove out all the cooks. He personally picked some fresh ingredients, washed them, and cooked a bowl of hot soup for himself as today's breakfast. After the hot soup was cooked, Dean put it on the table. He enjoyed it while reading the military morning newspaper that had just been sent to him. Auburn died at the Golden Wall. Where is the safe place for the barbarians to break out? The military will build a second line of defense behind the Red River to annihilate the barbarians in one fell swoop. Master Dean personally led 20 elite soldiers to guard the Scarlet Grand Canyon. They fought all night and killed 281 barbarian cavalrymen. I'll take care of this matter. I'll pick them up before the barbarians break into the civilian area. Well, be quick. Dudyan nodded as he wrote down the identity information of Jura and Gwyneth. If they want to bring other people but the number is small, then it's up to them. Yes. Reed nodded. The news that Dean was assassinated by a member of the escort team spread to the top of the military after Dean returned. All the generals and colonels who heard the news were alarmed. They were scared and broke into a cold sweat. They were relieved when they learned that Dean was only injured. There was some palpitation and fear in their hearts. If Dean was really assassinated by the escort team, then it would be a devastating blow to the military. Whether it was the anger of the people or the hatred of the Holy Church, the military would be in a state of subversion. Lorenzo jumped up from his chair the moment he heard the news. His whole body was drenched in cold sweat. After hearing that the assassination had failed, his tightened heart slightly relaxed. He suddenly realized that this matter was too simple. He secretly rejoiced that God had given him a chance to correct his mistake. Send 300 purple feather soldiers to Master Dean's castle to protect him for 24 hours. Listen to Master Dean's command, but don't let them leave Master Dean's side. Lorenzo ordered. He thought of something. Inform the 3 Gopher brothers. Let them go and protect Master Dean's life. Yes. The messenger turned and ran away. A 2-star general got up. General, the 3 Gopher brothers have been your personal attendants for many years. If you send them to protect Master Dean, then your safety will be. I'll stay in the barracks and won't go anywhere. It will be very difficult for the Dark Church to assassinate me. Lorenzo said in a deep voice, if Mr. Dean dies in this time of war, especially if he is under the protection of the military, then the military will be overthrown even if we win the war. These consortiums are not sheep but wolves. The 2-star general's face changed as he sat down. Check it for me. Lorenzo put his hand on the table as he looked at everyone. I want to know in 10 minutes whether the 2 assassins are from our military or not. I want to know their identities as well as the people related to them. Find out all of them for me. This assassination isn't just aimed at Master Dean. I suspect that the real target is the military. They want to intensify the conflict between the military and the Holy Church. In addition to the Dark Church, I want to see if there are other dirty people in disguise. General, the identity of the 2 assassins has been found out. An officer next to him said, they are from our military headquarters. One of them is a soldier called Port Allen, an honorable soldier who has made many meritorious deeds and won many awards. The other one is slightly older, called North Sundran. We checked his information and found that he is a retired soldier. He used to be a member of our military's Magic Blade. Later, he offended a noble in the commercial district during an operation to arrest a foreign army and was expelled from the Magic Blade army. Since then, he has disappeared without a trace. But I didn't pay attention to the person my daughter liked. If I had more contact with him, then maybe I would have been able to see that he is extraordinary. After all, the light of a genius can't be covered. The butler was startled and didn't know what to say. Every business needs to be carefully observed in combination with the market, general trends, materials, and other aspects. Rudolph said to himself, I have been in business all my life. I have followed the principle of observation, understanding, and implementation. However, I messed up this business deal. If I had given this young man some tests and made some requests, perhaps he would have shown me his potential back then. The steward sighed in his heart when he saw the depressed look on his master's face. He said, Master, you can't be blamed for this. Anyone would have done the same. No matter how hard a black-haired peasant tries, he can never become a noble. He can only blame himself for not showing his talent in magic. Rudolph shook his head. Hair color and identity are just external packaging of a commodity. We do business to dig out the value of something that others think is worthless and make huge profit. If everyone thinks that it is valuable, then it won't be able to sell it. But I made a mistake in this matter. I was blinded by the rough and humble appearance. I didn't see that it was wrapped in gold. The butler tried to comfort him. Master, it's useless to talk about these things. Even without him, our family will still prosper. We will still step into the inner wall, and your long-cherished wish will come true. Rudolph's mouth twitched. You don't understand. You don't understand. The Melon Consortium is finished. Do you know why I withdrew the funds from the consortium and sold the shares? It's because I know that the Melon Consortium and I have provoked a person that we shouldn't have provoked. But I didn't think that this person would grow so fast and terrifying. What? The butler was stunned as he didn't respond. Master, Melon Consortium is finished? How is it possible? Even if this person has become a master, he can't do anything to the Melon Consortium. When he escaped from prison, I thought it was just the negligence of Thornflower Prison. But look at the changes in the entire commercial district in just 1 year after his escape. We went to various places and heard the most common word. Yes, they are all about him. A year ago, he was still a prisoner. Now, he's the ideal lover in the eyes of all the noble ladies. He's the son-in-law that all the families want the most. When this war ends, he'll become the hero of all the commoners. Do you think that all this is just a coincidence? No. This isn't something that an average person can do. Most people don't have the courage to murder a deacon of the magistrate. He is a madman and an extremely terrifying mad genius. The butler was startled as he listened to Rudolph's words. Although it was an arrest, the carriages that were brought over were all of the highest quality, luxurious and noble. On the surface, it looked like soldiers were escorting some noble person. Lisa, I'm leaving. I'll leave this place to you. Sarah came to the front of the carriage and said goodbye to her guard. Although she was more mature than other children of the same age, she had to deal with family affairs at a young age. She was in charge of the life and death of tens of thousands of civilians. But at this moment, her eyes couldn't help but turn red. She bit her lips as she vaguely guessed that the youth was the reason why the consortium encountered such a thing. Although there were many enemies of the Melon Consortium, but the one she suspected the most was the youth. Her intuition told her that her heart was full of guilt and self-blame. If she could kill the youth earlier, then there wouldn't be so many problems. Miss, I know what to do. Take care of yourself, Lisa said in a respectful tone. She was dressed in a servant's attire. She looked like a handsome knight. However, her chest was bulging out. It was hard to ignore. Sarah held her skirt as she went up the carriage. Her fingers tightly clenched the skirt. The remorse and grievances in her eyes gradually turned into intense hatred. She never thought that one day she would be in such an embarrassing situation. Although the carriage she was sitting in was incomparably exquisite, it wasn't inferior to her private carriage. It was a luxury that ordinary civilians couldn't afford to ride in their entire life. The butler returned to the hall after George, Sarah, Mark and the others left. He looked at a servant. Immediately send the news to young Master Melk. Let him ask the bishop to come forward and bail the master. Yes. The servant replied. You go and call Mr. Myers and Mr. Melparton. Tell them that there is an important matter to discuss. Yes. You go and inform General William. Let him send people to take care of the master. Don't let anyone offend him. Yes. A series of orders were passed down from the mouth of the butler. The entire Mel Castle was like a huge machine that quickly operated. Is it done? Dean asked Crone. Crone gently picked up the letter from the desk and handed it to Dean. Master, it's done. Please have a look. Dean glanced at it and nodded. Send it to old Feline. Yes. Crone put the letter into an envelope and went out to deliver the letter. Dean got up and moved his muscles and bones. After sitting on the bed for a long time, he felt frozen. There seemed to be something wrong with his body. However, with the simple modern medical knowledge he learned from the superchip, he couldn't find the cause. It was estimated that it would be useless to ask other doctors to diagnose him unless he invited some top doctors. However, these doctors had connections with some big forces, and it was easy to leak his physical condition. He could only wait until he learned medical skills and then diagnose by himself. Dean went downstairs and came to the hall. Jake, Sandro and their children had been sent back to the Ryan Castle. The hall had become empty. It was deserted and quiet. However, Dean has long been accustomed to the silence. He looked up at the distant sky. His eyes flashed as he looked at Nicholas. The rain has stopped. Prepare some pastries and tea. Nicholas was surprised but didn't say anything. He turned around and ordered the kitchen. Dean sat on the sofa in the hall and quietly read a book. It didn't take long for the sound of hooves to be heard outside the castle. It was a horse galloping along the Tyza River. Reed and the remaining guards quickly stopped him. The latter took out a medal from his bosom and handed it over. Reed checked it and allowed him to enter. Master, people from the Knights' Hall have come to see you. Nicholas ran over. Dean didn't raise his head. Let them in. Yes. After a moment, the youth was led into the hall by Nicotine. He saw Dean sitting on the sofa. There was a trace of awe in his eyes. He stepped forward and saluted. Greetings, master. I'm a silver knight of the Knight's Hall, Bolt. Sit down. Dean put away the book and smiled at him. He raised his chin towards Nicholas. Nicholas ordered the servants to bring the pastries and tea. He was curious as he didn't know how Dudian predicted that someone would come to visit. Bolt sat down gracefully and took out a letter from his pocket. He handed it over with both hands and said respectfully, "Master, I'm here to deliver a letter. Please take a look." Dean nodded and took the letter. He looked at Bolt and smiled. "Thanks for the trouble. But please go back and tell them that the civilians in the residential district are in danger due to the barbarians' invasion. The nobles and civilians in the commercial district are also in danger. I'm about to go to the battlefield, so I have no time to accept the title ceremony from the Knight's Hall. I'll personally come to apologize if I survive the war." Bolt's eyes flashed with respect as he said, "I heard that Master disregarded his own safety and personally rushed to the battlefield. Not only did you guard the Scarlet Canyon for 16 hours, but you also killed hundreds of barbarians. You also captured a barbarian royal. It is really admirable. Compared to you, I am ashamed. I am a pure silver knight, but I can only stay in the commercial district. I can't go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. It is an insult to the knight's way." Bolt sighed as he said this. Dean smiled. "Justice is also part of the knight's spirit. Strictly abide by the law and obey orders. It's not necessary to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy." Bolt nodded and said, "Grandmaster is right. Since you don't have time to confer titles, I'll go back first." They were wearing hunter's armor that was full of holes and scratches from swords and arrows. Fortunately, the armor seemed to have been washed and there were no blood stains on it. But it wasn't difficult to see how fierce the battle was. In addition, Sergei's hair was also gone. He was shaved bald with 3 stitches on his head and 1 on his face. Gwyneth's situation was better. Her armor was tattered and there was a stitched wound on her neck. Her hair seemed to be a little short. But other than that there was no big problem. But the stitched wound on her neck was a bit shocking. "Master! Master!" Both of them nodded as they saw Dudian. Dudian glanced at them. "So shabby. Didn't the military give you new armor?" Hearing this, Sergei's mouth suddenly twitched and said, "Young master, you're still talking about it. Those grandsons of the military are really stingy. I'm so ket up, we helped them kill the enemy, but in the end we didn't even say a word when we left. We had to wash ourselves with water, otherwise we would have come back covered in blood." The military doctor who helped us had a look of reluctance on his face. "Just thinking about it makes me angry. What kind of thing is he, a military doctor with this kind of quality? Even if he discriminates against me, he should at least have a little bit of love. I really want to crush his head." Gwyneth rarely said 2 words. "Not bad. Are you hungry? Come and eat. Remember the faces of the people you don't like. I'll send someone to take you to the military to find them. If you can find them, then I'll help you kill them. What do you think?" Dean chuckled. "Your voice is quite loud. It seems that you didn't suffer any serious injuries. Are you hungry? Come and eat. If you are not convinced, then it's very easy." Chapter 399. Can you kill soldiers? Sergei raised his eyebrows as he suspiciously looked at Dudian. Dudian smiled. "Soldiers are also human beings. Why can't I kill them?" Sergei looked at him and snorted. "Forget it. When I find those wastes, my anger has already dissipated. But next time I meet such scum, can I kill them directly?" Dean smiled. "You can pick anyone below the general level. But don't let me do too many things." Sergei and Gwyneth were surprised as they heard Dudian's words. Killing soldiers on the spot wasn't a light crime. But from Dudian's tone it seemed that he could easily help them get rid of such a crime. "All right." Sergei grinned. "Then I won't be able to bear it in the future." Dudian nodded. "Let's talk about your participation in the war." Sergei and Gwyneth came to the table and sat down. The servants brought the meal. Sergey said while eating. It's even more annoying. Those bastards called us hunters and threw us out of the Golden Wall. If Gwyneth and I didn't cooperate with each other, then we wouldn't have come back alive. As far as I know, all the primary hunters sent by the other consortiums were dead. Only 1 or 2 intermediate hunters were lucky enough to survive. There were 15 senior hunters including me and Gwyneth. More than half of them were dead or injured. Dudian slowly nodded. Although he had heard about this matter from the informants, but it wasn't so detailed. It seemed that the military had weakened the private forces of the 6 consortiums. However, it was only weakened. Unlike the wealthy merchants of the olden days, as long as one was a noble, he or she had the right to recruit a corresponding number of guards according to the size of his or her territory. This was also the private military force of each noble. It was said that they were there to look after their territory and maintain order in their territory, but in reality, they were used for self-defense and against the military. Because of this, when all the private military forces under the command of the nobles were united, their numbers were so astonishing that the military, the magistrate, and even the Holy Church did not dare to provoke them. Among these private forces, the hunters were undoubtedly the strongest trump card. However, in Dean's view, the hunters were probably a small part of the top private forces of the consortia. After all, the wealth that could be obtained outside the giant wall was not much compared to the wealth that could be obtained inside the giant wall. It was not worth to invest too many troops over there. Moreover, in terms of organization, the hunters were only a vassal organization of private forces. Only those who rented the passage could form a hunter team. But there was also a limit to the number of hunters. Nobles who didn't rent the passage could only form territorial guards and knights. Knights had their own squires, which was one of the main reasons why many nobles loved knights. The damage to the consortium will be too great. George stared at him and said, "If I don't go out now, then the consortium will no longer exist. What is outside is not a sheep but a bloodthirsty wolf. There is also a group of tigers eyeing us." Bishop Payer was startled. Dean put on the hunter's armor and looked at himself in front of the mirror. He turned and left the room. Behind him, Sergey and Gwyneth, dressed as attendants, followed closely behind. "Master, are you going out?" Crone saw Dean in the hall and hurried to greet him. Dean said, "Prepare the horse and go to the military." "Yes." A moment later a horse was brought out of the castle. Dean stepped out of the castle and looked around at the hundreds of figures on the grass outside the castle. These were the elite troops sent by the military to protect him. If they were used in the front line during the war, they would play a great role. But at the moment they had become his personal guards. It showed how much the military was afraid of him. Looking ahead, the dark clouds had already retreated. The blue sky was clear, and the sun shone down on the earth. Dean smiled as he got on the horse. High up in the clear sky, a giant black shadow suddenly swept across the horizon. It wasn't the first time Dean saw it, but he didn't think much about it. He was in a good mood as he looked at Reed. "Colonel, what is that bird?" Reed looked up. "Master, it's not a bird. It's a dragon. It's rare to see a dragon. Generally you can only see it during the black snow season." "Dragon?" Dean looked at it. "How come we haven't seen a dragon in the outer wall?" Chapter 401. Dragon doesn't hurt people? Dean slightly raised his eyebrows as he looked at the black shadow that was flying into the sky. "Are you saying that such a big guy grew up as a vegetarian?" Reed replied, "Master, don't you know that the dragon is the mount of the god of light? It eats the monsters outside the giant wall. It doesn't hurt people." Dean quietly looked at the black giant that turned into a black dot and disappeared into the horizon. He didn't continue to talk with Reed. He felt a trace of unusual feeling in his heart. Compared to the divinity that Reed talked about, the cruel reality and the surrounding made him more inclined to believe in the bestiality. "Let's go," Dean said. Reed didn't think much about it as he issued an order. Everyone set off. Sergei and Gwyneth were at Dean's side. The 3 generals of the Gophers were next to them. There were 300 elite soldiers sent by the military. The murderous temperament of the elite soldiers was completely different from that of ordinary soldiers. It didn't take long for them to attract the attention of the residents on the street. Although the rain had stopped, there was still water on the ground that could wet the shoes. The horses galloped all the way to the northern military region. From Dean's castle to the northern military region, they passed through the main street of the commercial district. Dean was quickly recognized by the people and was followed by cheers and shouts along the way. Dean arrived at the northern military region after more than an hour. He took Sergei, Gwyneth, and the 3 generals of the Gophers to the headquarters of the military region. Lorenzo and several other older generals were in front of the sand table and discussing the military strategy. They had to stop talking after Dean arrived. "Master, are you going to the battlefield again?" Lorenzo knew the purpose of Dean's visit from the messenger's mouth. He felt helpless in his heart. Dean was definitely the most active master he had ever seen. Dean nodded and smiled. "Since the general knows, then I won't delay any longer. I hope that I can go out as a knight. You can give me a staff officer and some troop. I hope that I can personally go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. I won't retreat in the face of danger." Lorenzo felt some pain in his temples. "Master, we all know your intentions. But the battlefield is different from other places. The changes are too dangerous. If there is an accident, then the military won't be able to escape the blame. I hope that you won't embarrass us." Dean shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Since the general is worried that my death will put you in a difficult situation, then I will write this letter as my last words. Everything is voluntary and has nothing to do with the military. Is that okay?" Lorenzo was speechless. He thought that if Dean really died, then what would be the use of writing a letter? General Lorenzo had sent 2,000 elite soldiers to guard the forest. It could be said that the task was very easy and the safety factor was extremely high. "All right," Dean promised. "I promise to complete the task. Otherwise, I hope the general will punish me according to the military law." Lorenzo was relieved to see Dean agree. It seemed that he was overthinking. After all, Dean was just a teenager. He immediately said, "I hope you won't let me down." Dean nodded. His expression was very serious, but there was a trace of excitement. Lorenzo's face showed a touch of smile as he saw Dean's appearance. In that case, the master should set off immediately. "Yes." Dean responded in a military manner and turned to leave. Several generals looked at each other after Dean left. They smiled and shook their heads. "I have never seen such a troublesome master. I have never seen such a young master. After all, he is too young. Young people are always restless and like to toss and turn. His temperament is good. He isn't like some consortiums who take advantage of the war to make money from refugees. It's good to dispatch him to the forest of pain. We can't control him." The generals shook their heads and smiled. They withdrew their gazes and returned to the previous deduction topic with the flags in their hands. Dean set off from the military headquarters and went to the forest of pain. The horn of the military's counterattack had sounded on the battlefield. The rain had stopped and the dark clouds had melted. The artillery that was previously restricted by the rain had once again appeared on top of the city wall. The barbarians who were attacking the boundary wall of the residential area tasted the fierce killing weapon of the military. The defensive position of the city changed from a disadvantage to an advantage. Countless barbarians tried to invade the residential area. The giant frog, who was responsible for attacking the high wall, became a huge target in front of the artillery. They lost all the advantages. Time passed day by day amidst the roar of the war. The barbarians paid a heavy price to attack the residential area. However, they were still unable to take it down. They immediately changed their strategy. They dispersed into small groups and invaded the commercial district from various areas. However, the barbarians were too late. By the time they split their troops into small skirmishes, the military's long-awaited new weapon, the steam rifle, had finally entered the fray. It was the legendary military divine art that had recently spread like wildfire. The appearance of the steam rifle instantly ruined the plan of the barbarians to annihilate the barbarians. Instead, they suffered heavy losses and were forced to retreat step by step. In just 3 days, they were forced to retreat to the broken Golden Wall. The fierce battle continued. At the same time in the Forest of Pain, Dean led 2,000 elite soldiers and 300 elite soldiers that were sent by the military. They were stationed at the edge of the forest. Every day they would catch some wild animals and barbecue them to eat and drink. When Dean came to the Forest of Pain, there were several barbarian teams that tried to invade the area. However, they were easily killed by Dean's troop. In fact, he didn't need to stay in the area. The colonel-level staff officer was enough to deal with the barbarians. After all, he had crushed the barbarians in terms of military strength and terrain advantage. It was a complete one-sided massacre. It was a free credit for him to stay in the forest. This was given by the military and Dean was willing to accept it. Sergei grabbed a roasted rabbit leg and passed it to Dean, who was reading a book. "Master, it's too boring here. There are just some minions. When are we going back? We are wasting time here and there are many blood mosquitoes at night." Dean took the rabbit's leg and lifted his eyes from the book. He didn't care about the grease and dust on the rabbit's leg. He said while eating, "When we finish eating, we will go back. Let's leave this place to Spear." Chapter 402. Dudian obviously wasn't joking with Sergei. After eating the rabbit leg, he called Spear's staff officer. "There weren't any barbarians this morning. I guess they were killed and retreated. I'll leave this place to you. I'll take some people back and see if I'm needed in the front line." Spear looked at Dean in surprise. "Master, how can we do this? We have to stay here." You can do it." Dean patted his shoulder and passed by him. He got on the horse and called Sergei, Gwyneth, and the 3 mole generals. They left the Forest of Pain with 300 elite soldiers. They didn't return to the castle but went directly to the military headquarters. "Master, are we really going to leave like this?" Sergei carefully looked at Dean. "I'm just saying. Don't take it too seriously. If the military blames us, what's there to blame?" Dudian indifferently said, "Did any barbarians cross us and enter the commercial district while we were guarding?" No." Dean patted the horse and accelerated the speed of the march. Although he couldn't get any information or read the newspaper as he was stationed in the Forest of Pain for the past 3 days, but it was obvious that the barbarians had been repelled. After all, the weather had been dry for the past 3 days after the heavy rain. Although the temperature was only 3 or 4 degrees, but it didn't hinder the artillery. In addition to the artillery, he had made a lot of molds for the steam guns. He could mass-produce them and put them into the war. In such an era of cold weapons, the appearance of steam guns was a complete bully. The war was over before it started. Military headquarters. Command. Lorenzo and the generals stood in front of the sand table. The hills and lakes on the sand table didn't change much. The only difference was that the area inside the Golden Wall was covered with red flags. Now, there were only a few red flags on the hills in front of the Redtail River. They were the only barbarians that had invaded the area behind the Golden Wall. Immediately send a battalion with 200 steam guns to annihilate them. Lorenzo reached out and pulled out the red flags. He threw them to the side and ordered in an indifferent tone. The adjutant at the side immediately passed down the order. "Everyone, it's time to recapture the Golden Wall." Lorenzo looked at the gray wall. It used to be their proud territory. Dispatch the cannons on the boundary wall of the residential area. Also send a regiment. I want to hear the news that the Golden Wall has fallen before nightfall. Yes. Commander, with our current manpower, even if we recapture a section of the Golden Wall, we won't be able to defend it. Although the production speed of the steam guns is very fast, but the time is too short. The regular army is bedridden and their physical strength hasn't recovered yet. How about we activate the Golden Wall? Another general said. Lorenzo narrowed his eyes. Activating the Golden Wall is our ultimate means. We don't need to use it for the time being. If we expose all our cards in this war, most of them will be infiltrated by the Holy Church and the Dark Church in the future. We can't easily unsheathe the sword or it will rust. I also think so. Moreover, with the destructive power of the steam guns, as long as we capture a section of the Golden Wall, it won't be difficult to capture the rest of the place. All the factories can produce 8,000 steam guns a day. Moreover, the efficiency is gradually increasing. After the Golden Wall is captured, we can get nearly 10,000 steam guns tomorrow. In addition to the previous ones, we can completely recapture the Golden Wall. Another general said. If it doesn't work, then let's send the fire warriors. Lorenzo faintly smiled. The fire warriors are our last line of defense. They don't need to go on the battlefield. The battle will end here. Previously, when they were trying to snatch the Golden Wall, the damage was too serious. They won't be too stubborn now. After all, compared to the broken Golden Wall, they have occupied the Red Maple Mountains. It is easier to defend and more difficult to attack. The surrounding people were stunned for a moment before they came to a realization. This time the inner wall didn't send reinforcements. I don't know if the barbarians expected this or if there are other reasons. I hope that the inner wall won't come out at this time. Lorenzo whispered in a low voice. They were startled as they looked at each other. They frowned as they felt that the situation was unusual. Dudian asked for a pot of wine from a roadside pub on the way back to the military headquarters. He borrowed the newspaper from the owner. He threw the wine to Sergei as he read the newspaper. He couldn't help but smile. He patted the horse's head and it trotted forward. Dudian went to see Lorenzo after he arrived at the military headquarters. Lorenzo had a headache as he saw the active master. But he had the experience from last time, so he had a way to deal with it. He sent Dudian to follow the siege troops to a battlefield with a greater advantage. The danger was relatively low. Dudian readily agreed without any objection. Young master, why do I feel that the general is fooling us? I read in the newspaper that the most intense battle is at the Golden Wall. Why did he say that the place we are going to is more important? Is it more important than the Golden Wall? Sergei asked curiously as he rode on his horse. Dudian seriously replied, Don't talk nonsense. The general must have his reasons. We are soldiers, so we have to carry out the orders. Sergei strangely looked at Dudian. He thought that Dudian was such an obedient person. How come he didn't know about it before? He turned to look at Gwyneth. Gwyneth winked at him. He was startled for a moment but suddenly thought of something. He turned around and saw the three gophers. The three gophers were also looking at him. Sergei laughed and threw the wine in his hand. General Diron, do you want to drink? Diron smiled. I don't drink when I march. It's a waste of time. He threw the wine back to Sergei. No wonder you are the general and I'm just a soldier. Sergei laughed as he reached out to catch the wine. He turned his head and took a sip. The smile on his face slowly disappeared. Before sunset, the messenger rode a fast horse, shouting loudly as he galloped through the streets of the commercial district. The Golden Wall has been recaptured. The residents who heard the news were surprised. They looked at each other and then burst into cheers. Some of them were packing their luggage and preparing to migrate to the inner wall area. Since the rain stopped 3 days ago, the newspapers had the news of the victory of the counterattack. In the past 3 days, the situation of the war had been completely reversed. The territory that had been taken away by the military was slowly being taken back. However, no matter how many victories there were, it was not as exciting as the news of the Golden Wall being retaken. The restless hearts of the people in the commercial district and residential district had stabilized after the Golden Wall was recaptured. The military's counterattack didn't stop there. There were news of the victories in different areas. Dudian was stationed in the Forest of Pain and the barbarians were annihilated. He was sent to other areas to repel the barbarians. Chapter 403. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The Golden Wall that they had seized back had once again become the military's barrier. The defeated barbarians were driven out of the Golden Wall and set up camp in the vast Red Maple Mountains. They didn't want to give up their base so easily. After all, although the Red Maple Mountains belonged to the outer region, it was still within the stronghold. It was rich in resources. Once they left, they would be blocked by the stronghold again and be exiled forever. The military didn't rush to attack the Red Maple Mountains. Instead, they reorganized the soldiers and strengthened the defense of the Golden Wall. At the same time, the post-war inventory was gradually published in the newspapers. The casualties of various regions and the losses caused by the barbarians' invasion were calculated and published in the financial groups and the military newspapers. There were many generals and colonels who had sacrificed their lives in the war. They were published as heroes. Compared to most of the heroes who had died, several commanders and generals who had outstanding performance in the battle were also published and praised. Dean was also one of them. Dean saw that the military didn't pursue immediately. He knew that they were afraid of the barbarians' ambush. After all, the Red Maple Mountains had fallen into the hands of the barbarians. Moreover, the military wanted to wait for the regular army to recover before launching an attack. After all, the longer they dragged, the more steam guns they would be able to produce. The more they would be able to win and the lower the consumption of soldiers would be. "We should go back." Dean called Sergei and Gwyneth to get on the horse. He declined the escort of the 3 generals and the rest of the soldiers as he returned to the castle. The 3 generals didn't continue to insist. In the past few days they had seen that Dean and Gwyneth were extraordinary. Their strength wasn't inferior to theirs. It would be very difficult to hurt Dean with their protection. Moreover, the war inside the Golden Wall was over. Even if Dean suffered casualties, it wouldn't have much to do with the military. The battle is finally over, I can finally go back and have a good rest. On the horse, Sergei galloped, gulping down the wind as he shouted in the wilderness. Dean faintly smiled. He waited for Sergei to finish shouting. "The war has just begun. Do you want to be lazy?" Sergei was surprised. Just begun? Previously it was the war between the military and the barbarians. Now it is our war. Dean said, "Both of you will be busy after we go back." Sergei woke up. "I almost forgot about the damn Melon Consortium. They had sent 2 senior hunters but none of them died. One of them is a woman. She seems to have black weaver magic marks. The ability of this magic mark is terrible, especially in the aspect of assassination. She had shrunk into the ground during the battle. She was unscathed until the end of the battle. It's simply shameless." Dean couldn't help but think of Glenn's appearance. He smiled. "It's good that she didn't die. Hire her to join our consortium. She will be one of us in the future." "You want to recruit her?" Sergei shook his head. "It's not easy to recruit a senior hunter unless she doesn't want to live or the Melon Consortium collapses." Dean smiled but didn't open his mouth. Gwyneth silently looked at Dean. "Master, yesterday was a good opportunity. We would have made great achievements if we had led the troops to attack. But you don't seem to be willing to fight for military merit. Why is that?" Dean looked at her with interest. "What do you think?" Gwyneth slightly frowned. "I can't figure it out. That's why I asked young master." Dean smiled. "Sometimes you can't act too much. In addition, it's not your own business, so you don't have to work so hard. It's enough if you do it well. If you do it well, then it's perfect. If you try too hard, then it will be a flaw." There was a trace of doubt in Gwyneth's eyes. "Think about the problem from interests and results." Dean smiled. He patted the horse and galloped away. Sergei looked at Dean's back and muttered, "I knew that he was so honest. He certainly didn't have good intentions." "Go." The residents along the street recognized Dean as they returned to the commercial district. They cheered loudly and followed behind the horse's hooves. Dean saw hundreds of people standing on both sides of the road by the time he reached the river. They were holding flowers in their hands. It seemed that they were waiting for something. It seems that they are here to welcome us? Sergei was surprised but excited at the same time. Dean nodded and slowly rode the horse towards them. The people standing at the outermost edge screamed uncontrollably when they saw Dean. In an instant, the previous noise turned into a neat uproar. Everyone gathered towards Dean and others. Some even fell to the ground and were trampled by other excited people. Dudian was riding on the horse. Naturally, he noticed that some women wearing skirts had accidentally fallen into the crowd. He hurriedly glanced at them and then retracted his gaze. There was a gentle smile on his face. Coupled with the handsome knight's armor, he looked like an upright knight of light. Many women on both sides screamed loudly. Countless flowers were thrown to the top of Dudian's head. Some of them fell on the armor and some fell on the hair. The crowd followed and cheered all the way as Dean rode his horse. Gwyneth was riding behind Dean. She naturally saw the figures who had accidentally fallen. She wanted to say something but the words were drowned out by the tsunami of cheers. She was silent as she silently looked at the back of the thin youth. It seemed that his back was shining in the sunshine and flowers. On the other side, Sergei grinned. His face was full of smiles. Although he knew that these cheers, applause, and flowers weren't for him, but seeing the people around him cheering so crazily, his heart was still very happy. The road will eventually come to an end. Dean came to the front of the castle. He dismounted and turned to look at the people behind him. He raised his hand and waved. Once again there was a cheer. He didn't say anything and turned to enter the castle. Crone and Noyce quickly came out of the castle. Noyce took Dean's horse. Crone looked at Dean. "Master, you are finally back. Something terrible has happened in the past few days." Dean looked calm. "Tell the people outside to go back. Tell them that I want to rest and quiet." Crone was surprised but nodded. "All right." Chapter 404. Crone quickly stepped forward. "Master, Mel family's George, Mark and Sarah Mel were secretly arrested by the military when you left for the expedition. The news only spread in a small range. Later old Foulin got the news and spread it to the noble circle in the commercial district. Mellon Consortium's stock plummeted and there were problems in all the industrial chains." "What happened next?" Dean took a sip of coffee and calmly asked. Crone whispered. "Mellon Consortium was going to negotiate with the military to release the three of them. But the military didn't agree, so the matter was left unsettled." "So they didn't start a war?" "No. They have a bit of patience." Dean faintly smiled. "Are they still in the military?" Crone nodded. "Yes. The other members of Mellon Consortium saw that they were still in prison, so they withdrew their funds in large quantities. Mellon Consortium is in name only. I heard old Foulin say that he spread the news that Mellon Consortium had rebelled and colluded with barbarians to frame you. So the major nobles of Mellon Consortium have withdrawn from Mellon Consortium. Many of them have joined our New World Consortium." Dean nodded. "Now the war is over. Let's see how the old dogs will bite back." Crone was surprised to see that there was no surprise on Dean's face. He thought that Dean would be overjoyed, but he didn't expect Dean's reaction to be so dull. He couldn't figure out Dean's thoughts. "Master, Mellon Consortium is about to be overthrown. Shouldn't we celebrate?" "There is nothing to celebrate," Dudian indifferently said. "The moment you put the arrow, aim and shoot, the result has already come out. Moreover, this is just the first step we have to take. There is nothing to be happy about." Crone was startled. He suddenly thought of something and whispered, "Young master, I have arranged for the people you sent to the residential area to stay in the hotel outside. Now the situation is chaotic. I am worried that they will sneak in and harm you, so—" Dean was silent for a moment. "Tell Noyce to take them to the commercial district to pick a house to buy. The war has just ended and the prices of properties have fallen. Send a letter to old Fuline and ask him to use the resources of the consortium to buy a lot of properties at low prices. After a few years the price of houses will rise again." Crone was stunned. Yes. He turned and left. The war had come to an end for the time being. The commercial district and the residential district were in chaos. The barbarian invasion had dealt a devastating blow to the outer edge of the Golden Wall. Even inside the Golden Wall, the residents near the high wall had suffered heavy losses. Houses were destroyed and manors were burned. Everything needed to be rebuilt. The pain left by the war was engraved on the land. It was also engraved in the tears on everyone's face. It wasn't only the people living on the outer edge of the Golden Wall who suffered losses. The regular soldiers of the military had fallen ill due to the rain. They had to rely on the reserve army and the conscripted able-bodied men to make up the numbers. Fortunately, the new legendary steam rifle had appeared. So the reserve army and the conscripted able-bodied men were able to display terrifying lethality. The war that lasted for about 10 days had destroyed countless families. There were countless victims, but at the same time, there were also a large number of beneficiaries. Among them were various financial groups, as well as many rich people who took the opportunity to make money from the war. They raised prices and sold military supplies, causing their assets to explode in just 10 days. Of course, there were also some rich people who lost their family fortunes, went bankrupt, and became ordinary people. On the day when Dean came back, all parties received the news and sent people to send gifts. They wanted to make friends with the young legendary master as soon as possible. At the same time, the staff of the various consortia sent people to interview Dean. However, Dean refused all of them. Dean wrote a letter to inform Patriarch Old Fuline to set up a newspaper agency. In the future all of his interviews would be conducted in his own newspaper. In this way, the sales of the newspaper would be greatly improved. After all, the best way to create a public figure was to rely on the media. Newspaper was the only means of propaganda in this era. Old Fuline's ability to handle matters was very fast. In the afternoon he sent people to register a newspaper agency. He used a high salary to recruit some staff from other non-consortia. The name of the newspaper agency was very simple. It was called New World News. After the establishment of the newspaper agency, Old Fuline handed over the temporary management to Sander. He immediately went to attract some printing factories. He wanted to create a sensation in the market when the first copy of New World News would be sold tomorrow. This required contacts and ways. Fortunately, he was a noble and had Dean as his signboard. So it was easy to find people. Sandra led the interviewers to communicate with Dudian and set the time for the interview after dinner. After dinner, Dean sat in the hall. Sander was next to him. In front of him was a woman who was holding a notebook. She exuded an intellectual beauty. Her 2 young assistants were next to her. Sydney was both excited and nervous as she saw the legendary figure for the first time. Her palms were sweating as she held the quill pen. There was a professional smile on her face as she looked at Dean. "Master, can we start now?" "Let's start." Dean put down the tea and signaled her to ask freely. Of course, this was an issue that had been discussed a long time ago. Sydney took a deep breath and straightened out her throat. "Master Dean, what is your dream since childhood?" "My dream is to become a master of divinity. I want to use divinity to change people's lives. I want to make poverty and suffering far away from the world." Dean smiled as he spoke. Sydney immediately complimented him. "Master is really different from us ordinary people. Your dream from childhood is so great and extraordinary." Dean corrected her. "People never become great because of the greatness of their dreams. They become great because of the realization of their dreams." Shweli was slightly startled. After thinking for a while, a hint of admiration appeared in her eyes. She said, "Master, you really hit the nail on the head. As far as I know, you were born as a commoner. Your achievements today are inseparable from your talent and hard work. Which do you think is more important, talent or hard work? Of course, diligence is important. Talent accounts for 30% of success and 70% depends on diligence, Dean calmly replied. He thought in his heart, you will know how important talent is when you haven't caught up with the footsteps of others. Sydney nodded. Master, I've seen many people try very hard but they still fail. Is it because their talent isn't enough? Dean replied. Many people's efforts are just to deceive themselves and show to others. It can only be said that they are trying very hard. Shweli was stunned for a moment. She quickly wrote it down and asked, Master, according to what you said, gold will always shine, right? Yes, as long as it is gold. Unfortunately, most of you are just a stone. You won't shine. Sydney nodded. Most of us are eager to achieve our dreams like you. We are willing to work hard for it. Do you have any good suggestions? Learn to get up early, sleep more. At least there is a possibility that the dream will come true. Shweli covered her mouth and chuckled. Master, you're so humorous. You've gained both fame and fortune, and you're enjoying endless wealth. How do you view wealth? Wealth doesn't make people really happy, Dean replied in a serious tone. Poor people like to hear rich people say that. Sydney asked, Master, which one do you think is more important, morality or wealth? Without a doubt, of course it is morality, Dean said. A moral person will be respected and loved from the heart. Even after his death, he will be immortal. But wealth and money will only corrupt people. Unfortunately, most of them were working for rich people. Sydney was in awe as she heard Dean's words. Master is indeed a noble knight. I hope that through today's interview everyone can learn the spirit of Master and be a kind person. Thank you for the praise, Dean said. If we treat people with kindness, then we will be treated with kindness, right? How can we bully you if you aren't kind? Chapter 405. Time flew and the interview gradually came to an end. Master, I heard that you received a title from the Knights' Hall during the war, but you didn't accept it. Instead you rushed to the battlefield. Are you not willing to be a knight? Sydney looked at the draft and asked Dudian. The main purpose of the question was to give Dudian more opportunities to express his thoughts. Dudian smiled. It's because I want to be a knight that I chose to rush to the battlefield. As a knight I have to fulfill my own knightly standards. That's how a real knight should be. Good. Sydney cheered. Her beautiful eyes were sparkling as she said, Master, thanks to your legendary steam gun, we were able to defeat the barbarians and drive them out of the Golden Wall. Will you create new legendary magic in the future? Dudian smiled. I can't guarantee that I will be able to create a new legendary item, but I will continue to do research in this area. I'll talk about the specific results in the future. In addition to the steam rifle's contribution, we also have to thank the soldiers of the military headquarters who fought hard and exchanged their blood and lives for victory and soil. In addition, we also have to thank the consortiums who actively provided the military with facilities and supplies in the rear. It was their selfless contribution that made us unite against the enemy. Unfortunately, the performance of some of the consortiums disappointed me. Sydney knew what Dudian was going to say but still asked, Master, who are the individual consortiums you are referring to? I can't say the names of the consortiums as I don't want to have a bad influence on them. But I believe that they will know who I am talking about if they read this report. I just want to advise them not to make such a mistake in the future. Dudian smiled. Sydney nodded. Thank you, Master. Today's interview was very enjoyable. Thank you for your cooperation. I'm sorry to disturb your precious time. It's getting late. Pay attention to your safety on the way back. Dudian smiled. The next day, the sun was shining brightly in the morning. Military HQ, in front of the prison. Two teams of knights wearing dark red armors stood neatly on the grass outside the prison. The style of the armor was well known in the commercial district. It was the exclusive style of the Mel family. There was a dark red flower engraved on the chest of the armor. It was delicate and beautiful. It was very beautiful. On both sides of the night, soldiers in military uniforms surrounded the entire prison. Their faces were cold and their auras were filled with killing intent. The door of the prison slowly opened. Blatter helped George Mel to come out. Mark and Sarah silently followed behind them. They arrived in front of the stairs. The warm sunlight shone through the eaves. George gently raised his hand to block the sun. But the family was built in the most prosperous area. There was no lack of harsh words in the curses. She had never heard so many dirty words in her life. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. Her hatred towards Dean had reached an unprecedented level. Master, Mississippi, the butler led the servants to greet them. George got off the carriage and walked into the castle. What happened today? I heard from Bullet yesterday that there was no trouble except for the withdrawal of some shareholders. What happened today? The butler's face turned ugly as he whispered, Master, yesterday the New World Consortium arranged a newspaper to interview Master Dean. Who would have thought that Master Dean would say that he was disappointed with a consortium in the war? The crutches stopped. George Mel stopped as well. The butler's heart was trembling as he looked at him. He had been in the Mel family for many years, but he had never seen George show such an angry expression. He was disappointed? Just because he was disappointed. George's arm, which was holding the crutch, trembled slightly. His originally gloomy expression was completely out of control. He felt that his chest was about to explode. When he was young, he was all-powerful. Although he was old now, who wouldn't be respectful and polite to him? But now, because of the words disappointed of a 16-year-old boy, he was cursed for several streets? What a bully! Sarah's face was full of anger. What do you mean by disappointed with a consortium? Now that our Mel family has been imprisoned by the military for so many days, even a fool would know that we are the consortium he was referring to. Bastard! Damn bastard! She wanted to curse, but she didn't know what to say. Chapter 406. Master, they are out of prison, Crone respectfully reported. Dean put down the newspaper and smiled. Did anything happen on the road? No, Crone whispered. Old Foulin hired some people to insult them along the road according to your instructions. But they didn't respond. Dean faintly smiled. It's decent to be able to hold back. Master, what should we do next? Crone whispered. It's time to see their performance. Dean indifferently said, I'll write a letter. Ask Noyce to personally deliver it to the temple. I'll give a public lecture about the principles of gas faction in 10 days. I'll accept 8 students. Crone replied, Yes. The second thing is that you inform old Foulin to buy a guard of the Mel family. No matter how much money he has to spend, he has to come to see me. Remember to buy the strongest one, Dudian whispered. In addition, tell the Patriarch that if the Mellon Consortium uses a lot of money to pull the other shareholders back to the consortium, then tell them in advance that I want to accept students. If the shareholders insist on going back, then let them go. Don't hold them back. Crone bowed his head. Yes. Skagen was stunned as he read the letter presented by the servant who claimed to be Dean. He put away the letter and ordered people to send the servant away. Then he looked at his student. Immediately inform the temple that Master Dean will give a public lecture about gas faction in 10 days. Moreover, he will select students with potential. This is a master's lecture, so it must be on the headlines of the temple for 3 consecutive issues. The student was surprised as he heard Dean's words. He turned around and ran away in excitement. In the past few days the temple was talking about the role of the gas faction. There were many speculations about the role of the gas faction. Although there were masters who had come out to explain, but they didn't know much about it. It would be much easier to understand if the creator of the system personally came out to explain. The news spread like wildfire. The journals haven't been published yet, but the consortiums have been informed of the news. The entire commercial district was in a sensation. They immediately sent people to inquire about the specific arrangements of the lecture, as well as Dean's conditions for accepting students and so on. Only the lower-level nobles and ordinary civilians were still immersed in the pain of the destruction of their homes, the death of their relatives and friends, or the loss of their property. Father, the Bethel family, the Kunka family, and the Ram family are willing to return to the consortium. Mark looked a little tired, but the price is 3 times as much as before. Each person wants 8% of the shares. The rest of the families haven't responded yet. Milan family wants 30% of the shares. Rudolph's servants told me that Rudolph is ready to withdraw from the consortium. George was sitting on a big chair with a cane in his hand. His silver hair was like frost. His eyes were sharp as he said in a cold voice, "A group of rebellious people. 3 times is 3 times. Promise them. After we get through this crisis, we will marginalize them. The Milan family and Rudolph are wearing the same pant. 30% of the shares. How can they say it? Tell the Milan family that the maximum is 20%. The number of shares in our hands can't be less than 51%. Otherwise the kid doesn't need to do anything. We will be destroyed." Mark frowned. "Father, what should we do if Rudolph withdraws?" "You go and talk to him." George's face was gloomy. "His father and I jointly founded the Melon Consortium. How can he withdraw from it? I'm afraid that his father will die in peace if he hears about it." Mark sighed. "All right, but Rudolph is stubborn. He deliberately withdrew his investment. I'm afraid that a few words won't change his mind. In my opinion, we have to find a way to deal with the kid first. Otherwise the pressure on the others will be too great. It will be bad for us. Now is a sensitive period. The kid will be on guard against us. We have to think of another way to deal with him." George said in a cold voice, "Tell Rudolph that if he doesn't withdraw his investment, then the Mellon family will be the leader of the Mellon Consortium in the future." Mark was startled. He thought for a moment and nodded. "Okay." He was about to turn away when a golden feather messenger crow flew in from the window. It was a messenger crow that was specially raised by the temple. It was a rare breed and was considered to be of noble lineage. George was startled. He raised his hand and the messenger crow landed on his arm. He opened the letter on the crow's leg, shook it open, and read it. His face suddenly changed, and he tore the letter into pieces. Because his action was too big, the crow on his arm flapped its wings and flew out of the window, dropping 2 pale golden feathers. Mark's heart sank. "Father, what's the matter?" "Damn little bastard." George clenched his fist. His eyes were full of anger. "He will hold a public lecture in 10 days. Moreover, he is ready to accept students. Damn bastard." He announced the news at this time. It is obvious that he is giving the opportunity to other nobles to fight over him. This little bastard is too vicious. Mark's face turned gloomy. Most of the architects who had potential in the temple had aristocrats or rich people to rely on. After all, the cost of an architect was enormous. If there was no one to provide financial support, then the efficiency of the research would be extremely low. Now that Dean had announced the news, it was tantamount to throwing out a tempting fruit. Everyone was eager to become the youngest student of a legendary master in history. As a result, these people were bound to wash their relationship with the Mellon Consortium and isolate them. "We have underestimated him in the past." Mark took a deep breath and clenched his fist. There was a trace of regret in his heart. If he knew that this would happen, then he wouldn't have given such a dangerous person to his daughter. He should have personally eliminated him. There was silence in the room. It was depressing and silent. Only the heavy breathing of both of them could be heard. George's chest went up and down as he gradually restrained his anger. He was about to open his mouth when there was a knock on the door. Anger flashed in his eyes as he said in a low and hoarse voice, "Come in." The door was opened and the butler came in. There was a middle-aged man in black armor behind him. Mark frowned as he saw the middle-aged man. "Ron, what's the matter?" The middle-aged man named Ron nodded. "Master, mister, the New World Consortium has sent someone to find me." George's eyes flashed with a cold light. "What did you say?" The butler who was next to him was shocked. He subconsciously took 2 steps back as he looked at the middle-aged man. Ron calmly replied, "Master, the New World Consortium has sent someone to find me. They gave me a huge sum of money. 500,000 gold coins. They want to bribe me. They want me to betray the Mel family. They want me to go to Master Dean and listen to his instructions." George coldly stared at him, narrowing his eyes. 500,000 gold coins, what a big sum. "You've come here to say this, do you not agree?" "Yes, I will never betray the Mel family," Ron replied. "How can I believe you?" George stared at him. Ron looked at him and turned to look at Mark. "Mister, you have saved my life. I vowed to do my best to defend the Mel family. Do you believe me?" Chapter 407. George stared at him, and slowly nodded. "Since you said so, then I will leave this matter to you." "Yes." Mark nodded and looked at Ron. "Have you responded to the secret bribe?" Ron Cohen shook his head and said, "There's no response yet. As soon as I found out about this, I came to report to Master and Mister." "Very good." Mark nodded and sneered. "This kid used his identity as a master to isolate our Melon Consortium. He wants to bribe our commanders. His purpose is nothing more than a duel with his knight. Let's go with his plan. You should agree to it first." Ron was startled. "Master, do you mean that I will pretend to be bribed and pass the information to you?" "Yes," Mark said, "but you have to act well. Don't let them see through you." "I will." Ron nodded. Mark said, "All right, you go first." "All right." Ron Cohen accepted the order and left. After he left, George slowly opened his mouth and said, "Can we trust him? If he has already been bribed, then using this to exchange for our trust, wouldn't it be?" Mark slightly shook his head. "Father, I don't believe in other people, but he is the one I trust the most in addition to the shadow. Not to mention 500,000 gold coins, even 5 million gold coins wouldn't be enough. He doesn't care about money." George stared at him. "This is a critical moment. We can't afford to lose. We can't afford to make any mistakes." "No, I'm sure of it." Mark looked at him seriously. "It doesn't matter even if Father says it doesn't matter. We can try again. I don't believe that we can't win against that kid." George nodded slightly and said, "That's good. I want to see what that kid wants him to do. Could it be that he wants to assassinate us?" "If that's the case, then it's good," Mark said, "but this matter reminds us. Besides Ron, I don't know if the other attendants have been bribed. It seems that we have to reorganize them." "Yes." George nodded. "Master." Crone ran into Dudien's study. "Ryan family has sent news that they have bought the Knight Commander of the Mel family. They want to ask you what they want him to do?" Dean slowly put down the book. "Nothing. Let him come and see me. Tell him that I have something to discuss with him." "All right." Crone went out to reply. "Sir, they sent me a message to meet Master Dew directly." Ron handed the note to Mark. The note was taken from a piece of bread. It still had the fragrance of the bread on it. Mark looked at it and narrowed his eyes. "It seems that he is afraid of being exposed, so he left some evidence. He wants you to go directly to him. He must have something important to discuss with you. But it is also possible that he wants to test your loyalty." He pondered for a moment, then nodded. "All right, you go. It is best to kill him if there is a suitable opportunity. Everything will be over in that way." "Yes." Ron Cohen's answer was very decisive. Although he knew what the consequences would be if he killed Dean, but he still agreed without hesitation. Mark looked at him and patted his shoulder. "But it's the first time he sees you. He will be wary of you. Don't act rashly if the time isn't right. There will be opportunities in the future as long as you gain his trust. Understand? Got it. Lancôme lowered his head. All right, go. The meeting time was set for the evening. Dean asked the kitchen to have dinner before the night fell. He let Crone and Nicholas eat first. After dinner he asked Crone to call Sergei. He threw a stack of gold notes to the burly man. Tonight you are going to the most famous Moulin Rouge to play. Remember that you are not allowed to come back until the money is spent. Sergei was yawning, but his eyes widened as he heard Dean's words. Master, what are you doing? Sympathize with my subordinate, Dean indifferently replied. Sergei felt that the sun had risen from the west. Although it was inconceivable, he quickly picked up the gold notes from the table and stuffed them into his pants. He smiled. In that case, I won't be polite. I guarantee that you will spend it all. Remember to go to the best Moulin Rouge, Dean indifferently said. If you don't have a good time, then I'll destroy your foundation. Sergei felt a chill in his crotch, his legs were slightly clamped, he smiled bitterly. Young master, what do you want to do? Just tell me, I'll cooperate with you. You're making me feel a little uneasy. Go. Dean waved his hand as he was too lazy to say more. Sergei helplessly said, Then I'm really going to play. Crone whispered to Dean after Sergei left. Master, don't you have an appointment with the Knight Commander of the Mel family to discuss things? Don't you trust Sergei? Those who I don't trust are dead, Dean said. Those who are in front of me are trustworthy. Go and prepare to welcome them. Crone was full of doubts, but he still turned and left. The night was getting darker. Ron Cohen disguised himself as an ordinary person and rode an ordinary horse to the front of the ancient castle. Even though his clothes were extremely ordinary, his upright posture and the somber aura he exuded made it hard for others to ignore him. Ron dismounted from the horse and covered his eyes with his hood. He came to the front of the castle. Who is it? Noyce, who was guarding the door, shouted. In fact, he had a guess in his heart when he saw the murderous aura of the man. Full moon, Ron Cohen said the prearranged secret code. Noyce nodded and pushed the door. Please come in. Ron Cohen pulled his hood down a little and ducked in. Ron had often heard rumors about this young genius in the Mel family. It was the first time that he came to the castle. The first impression he had when he entered the hall was that the place was shabby. The lights were dim and the hall was plain. However, his gaze immediately fell on the figure sitting on the sofa in the middle of the hall. Just like the rumors said, he was handsome, tall, and at the same time, just like what the noble ladies said, he was well-mannered and had a refined temperament. However, as a person who had killed countless enemies in the battlefield, he sensitively sensed a deeply hidden aura from this person. It was extremely dark and thick, like a mass of viscous fog. Ron. Dean looked at the Knight Commander and smiled. Ron Cohen lifted his hood and said, That's me. Are you Master Dean? Yes, Dean said. It's our first meeting, so I can't trust you. Can I check your body? No one is allowed to carry weapons here. Ron nodded, took out a dagger from his bosom and said, I only have this weapon, it's for self-defense. With that said, he bent down and put it on the ground. There was a smile on Dean's face. Very good. Knight Ron is very honest and worthy of being a golden knight of the Knight's Hall. However, I'm afraid of death, so I'll have to check again. I hope you don't mind. Ron nodded. It's okay. Dean snapped his fingers. A quiet girl who was waiting next to Ron nodded. She reached out to touch Ron's shoulder to check if there was any place to hide things. Ron frowned as he saw that the girl wasn't dressed like a maid. There was a trace of doubt in his heart, but he didn't say anything. He didn't know anything about the master's daily life. He raised his arm and let the girl touch his chest. Suddenly, puff, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Ron's pupils shrank. He hurriedly shook his arms and used a huge force to hit the girl behind him. However, the girl was as soft as a feather. She moved back like a soft breeze. Ron looked down and saw a small needle piercing his clothes. His face turned ugly as he looked at Dean, who was sitting on the sofa. He covered the place where the needle had pierced. He didn't want the poison to spread to other parts of his body. He gritted his teeth and looked at Dean. "Master, why?" Dean gently blew on the coffee. "Don't you know that your only use is to die here?" Chapter 408. The smile on Dean's face disappeared as he looked at the angry man. He threw the cup of hot coffee in his hand and kicked the table in front of him. The scalding hot water splashed on Ron's face. However, the pain was nothing compared to the anger in his heart. He kicked the table and broke it. He roared as he approached Dean and stabbed him with the dagger. Whoosh! At this time, a breeze came from behind. It was Gwyneth. She was holding a sword and was chasing after Dean. Ron didn't care as he went straight towards Dean. He would rather give up his life to take away Dean's life. Dean quietly looked at Ron's angry face. He suddenly smiled as he raised his hand and grabbed Ron's wrist. Ron's anger was abruptly stopped. Ron Cohen's pupils dilated as he looked at the youth in disbelief. The tremendous force that came from his wrist made him so shocked that he could not speak. "I'm sorry, but you can't kill me," Dean said with a smile. At the same time, he pulled Ron's hand that was holding the dagger to his chest. The dagger cut the left side of his chest. Puff! Ron's clothes were cut and the tip of the dagger made a cut on his skin. Ron stared blankly. Before he could react, a sharp whistling sound came from behind him. The next moment, he only felt that his body was suddenly pulled by Dean, and he was not under his own control. The power that came from the boy was so great that it made him feel terrified. Then he saw his body turned around, facing the back. The girl who had previously searched his body was holding a sword, and her pretty face was as cold as frost. She did not have the temperament that a servant should have. Puff! The sword pierced through his heart. Blood gushed out of Ron Cohen's throat. He wanted to swallow it, but the blood rushed up his throat too quickly. In the end, he didn't have the strength to swallow it. He suddenly spat it out, and blood splattered all over the ground, staining the girl in front of him. His consciousness blurred. Runcorn fell to the ground, dead. Dean smiled and retracted his hand. He called Crone, "Bring me my first aid kit. Also inform the magistrate that there is an assassination attempt." Crone and Nicotine, who were already frightened, immediately agreed and ran away. "Thanks for your hard work," Dean said to Gwyneth as he sat down on the sofa that was pushed into the hall. He bandaged himself and said to Gwyneth. Gwyneth was still holding the sword as she stood in front of the corpse. She didn't care about the blood splashing on her face and body. She silently looked at the teenager. "This is what I should do." Gwyneth's fingers gently rubbed the hilt of the sword as she spoke. She guessed that if Sergei was here then he would be shocked. Although she and Sergei expected Dean to remove the steel nails because he wasn't afraid of their sneak attack, but they had seen with their own eyes that the teenager's strength was much higher than theirs. Ron Cohen's physique wasn't inferior to a senior hunter's. In fact, he was even stronger than most senior hunters. However, he was like a weak child in front of Yishiwan. He was easily subdued. Gwyneth couldn't help but think of the legendary monster's body outside the giant wall. Her mood was a bit complicated. A hunter with legendary magic marks was sitting in front of her. She lived in the inner wall, so she knew how great the potential of a person with legendary magic marks was. Moreover, the other party was a master of the invention. He had enough resources to cultivate himself and set foot on the highest peak. After a moment, the magistrate arrived. 2 teams of knights of the magistrate and 2 deacons of the magistrate came in a hurry in the dark. It showed how much importance they attached to Dean's matter. As soon as they entered the hall, the 2 deacons saw Dean sitting on the sofa next to the hall. Dean's chest was bandaged with gauze. The girl was silently standing next to him with a sword in her hand. There was also a corpse on the ground and 2 stewards who were silent next to him. There was dead silence in the hall. The 2 deacons of the magistrate were surprised. Their eyes stayed on the corpse for a moment. They came to the front of Dean. Master, is this the murderer who tried to assassinate you? Dean nodded. Please help me find out the identity of this person. Why did he want to assassinate me? Leave it to us. Rose took a deep breath. Master, are you okay? Do you want me to call someone to check your body? Dean shook his head. It's just a scratch. I'm fine. Rose saw that the gauze was wrapped with a faint red color. There was a very long diagonal scar. Rose was scared. Master, I'll send someone to check. Please describe the assassination. Duddian nodded. The man said that he had something to ask of me. So I asked the attendant to let him in. But he didn't say a few words and suddenly attacked me. Fortunately, I had her to protect me. Plus I'm a knight, so I was able to avoid a fatal blow. Rose nodded and asked the assistant to write down the details. Rose looked at Dean. Master, we have to investigate the scene. Please, I'll go upstairs to rest. Dean said. Okay. Rose nodded. Take care. Dean raised his hand and slowly went upstairs with Nicotine's help. The next day, New World News once again published a shocking news. Master of Invention and City Defense hero Dean was assassinated last night. He almost lost his life. The shocking title attracted countless people to buy the newspaper. New World News once again won the first place in newspaper sales. Mel family. George woke up from his bed. The maid helped him to change into soft home clothes. He washed his face and brushed his teeth. He went to the dining room with the help of the maid. The newspaper and breakfast were ready on the table. He sat down and took a sip of the warm milk to moisten his throat. Chapter 409. Knock, knock, knock. There was a hurried knock on the door. Mark was drowsy from exhaustion when he heard this sound. His brain was in pain. He didn't have the strength to open his eyelids. He instinctively frowned. Last night, he drank a lot of wine in order to win over several big families. Although he drank some sobriety medicine afterwards, he was still a bit uncomfortable. At the moment he heard this sound, his heart was unspeakably irritated. He raised his hand to pinch the bridge of his nose and sighed softly. He knew that something must have happened for someone to knock on the door so urgently. Sitting up from the bed, he raised his hand slightly. The maid next to him handed him a warm and wet towel. He wiped his face and let out a sigh of relief. Is it Saya? Come in. The maid opened the door and Sarah rushed in. She was startled as she saw her tired father sitting on the bed. There was a trace of guilt in her heart, but she quickly said, Father, something big has happened. Speak slowly. Mark's face sank as he stood up. The maid immediately came forward to help him put on his clothes. Sarah Mel quickly handed the newspaper in her hand and said, Father, look. Mark took the newspaper and swept it. He saw the eye-catching title. His tired face froze as if he was struck by lightning. Sarah didn't expect her calm father to react like this. She was scared and nervous as she said, Father, did you send someone to do this? If not, with that kid's sinister personality, do you think he'll smear this matter on us? Mark gradually recovered. Commander Ron, tell him to come and see me. Commander Runcorn? Sarah was at a loss. She suddenly thought of something and her face changed. Father, it shouldn't be. Mark rudely interrupted her. I'm asking you if he's here? I'll go and ask the butler. Sarah was shocked. Her father had never been so fierce to her since she was a child. Even when she made a mistake and messed up the family's business worth 100,000 gold coins, he didn't say half a word to her. He even comforted her. But she also realized the seriousness of the matter. She immediately turned around and ran out. After a moment, Sarah returned with a pale face. Father, Commander Ron isn't here. Mark had just changed his clothes. His body shook as he heard this. He almost fainted. Father, could it be that this was really done by Commander Ron Cohen? Sarah Mel's lips slightly trembled. Why? Did you send him? If it's really him, then the newspaper said that the assassin failed and was killed by his squire. Sooner or later the investigation will lead to us. Mark stood in the same place. His mind was buzzing. He couldn't hear what his daughter was saying. Boundless despair shrouded his heart. He had fallen many times in his life, but he had never suffered such a huge setback. Did Ron betray me? No, he won't betray me. If he was bought, then I would lose my life. We have let him exploit the loopholes again and again. There is no way to recover with money. Assassinating a master will alarm the Holy Church. According to the agreement between the magistrate and the Holy Church, they have the right to send people to participate in the magistrate's investigation. The Light Church is very protective of their own people. They will definitely listen to that brat's instructions and put the blame on us. There's no hope anymore. Our only hope now is to rise again. But, Sarah's heart was in pain. She couldn't accept such a blow. She wanted to act like an ordinary noble lady of the same age. However, there were some words that she couldn't say. She just couldn't accept such a cruel reality. She couldn't bear it. Go! Mark angrily rebuked. Sarah bit her lips, tears flowed out from her sparkling crystal-like eyes and fell down her beautiful cheeks. She wiped her tears, covered her mouth and turned around to run out. Second floor, study room. The words are wrong. Copy them 100 times. Dean threw the small book in front of the boy. The boy was Gabriel. Not only can you read but also write. Knowledge is more useful than a sword. Do you know? Gabriel bowed his head. I understand, young master. Dean nodded. Go. Gabriel took his little book and turned to leave. Behind him, a small house made of countless small blocks was placed on the table. The little girl, Artemis, lay on the table, carefully piling up the roof with her hands. Her green hair set off her little face, making her look as cute as a porcelain doll. Dean got up and sat down at the desk. What is this? Artemis was a little timid before him. She shrank back and said, It's a house. Do you like such a house? I like it. Dean smiled. He stretched out his finger and flicked it at the bottom of the house. A block flew out and pushed the blocks next to it to move. The tall house collapsed in an instant and became a table of scattered blocks. Artemis was stunned. She looked at the scattered blocks on the table and then looked at Dean. Her lips flattened and her eyes turned red. It seemed that she wanted to cry, but she didn't dare to do so. Last time she cried and her brother was punished to swing his sword 3,000 times. His hands were so sore that he couldn't even hold the knife. It seems that the house you built isn't strong enough, Dean said. Artemis flattened her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Let's do it again. Dean smiled. Don't be angry. There will be punishment if the house is in a mess. Chapter 4:10. Master Dean, the identity of the assassin has been investigated. In the hall, Deacon Ross reported to the teenager who was sitting on the sofa. His attitude was polite and there was even a trace of humility in it. In terms of status, Deacon of Magistrate was barely equal to Senior Architect. He had to be polite in front of a master, not to mention a master like Dean who was destined to have an extraordinary future and unlimited potential. Dean nodded. He saw Rose's aura. Deacon, please speak. I'll listen. Rosace was flattered. He nodded and said, All right, master. This assassin is called Ron Cohen. He was born in a commoner's family. At the age of 13, he caught the eye of Knight Veniamin of the Hall of Knights and was accepted as a student. Later, under Knight Veniamin's guidance, he gradually rose to prominence. At the age of 28, he successfully passed the Golden Knight test and became an outstanding Golden Knight. Shortly after becoming a Golden Knight, Ron Cohen declined all invitations and took the initiative to join the Mel family. Since then he has served as the commander of the Mel family. Ross looked at Dean. He had heard about the conflict between Dean and Mel family. It was easy for him to find out the truth as long as he wanted to investigate. Dean's calm expression sank. Deacon, do you mean that the Mel family sent someone to assassinate me? Rose smiled. Master, this is only a preliminary investigation. We haven't found out whether Mel family is behind this, or he came here on his own. Rose's voice couldn't help but weaken as he said this. Why would a knight commander take the risk to assassinate a master if there was no instruction? Haven't found out? Dean turned to look at him. Deacon, how long do you think it will take to find out? Ross could feel the anger in Dean's words. He couldn't afford to offend either of them. He reluctantly smiled. Master, don't worry. We will take the time to investigate and let the Mel family give you a reply as soon as possible. If they are the mastermind, then we will give you an explanation. Moreover, our people have gone to the Mel family to investigate. Dean nodded. There was still a bit of anger on his face, but he didn't say anything. Investigate? At this moment, a clear voice came from outside the hall. Dean and Rose saw a middle-aged man in silver armor enter the room. The arrogance on his face converged as he saw Dean. Holy Church's keeper Redmayne. Greetings, Master Dean. Please forgive me for taking the liberty to visit. What was supposed to come had finally come. There was a touch of smile on Dean's face. Hello, I didn't greet you. I hope you can forgive me. Master, you're too polite. Redmayne smiled. We have been ordered to cooperate with the magistrate to investigate the assassination case. We will give Master a satisfactory answer. Most of the people who dare to attack Master are related to the dark cult. His cheeks were a bit depressed, but he still maintained an indifferent and dignified appearance. Someone must take responsibility for this matter. I will take responsibility when the keeper of the Holy Church comes to investigate. This assassination is purely a business competition. In this case there will only be some fines. Now you should sell your properties as soon as possible. You should transfer your assets and funds out of the family. Everyone was stunned. Sarah looked at her father. Tears fell from her eyes. There was a tearing pain in her heart. She suddenly regretted her willfulness and self-righteousness. If she could have killed that boy earlier, then there wouldn't have been any problems. But now, the entire family had been forced into such a sorry state by a single person. Regret. Pain. Regret. She had never regretted something like this. Unfortunately, time wouldn't reverse for her. Suddenly, a cough came from behind Mark. Mark was startled. He turned his head and saw his father being supported by the butler. They hadn't seen each other for half a day. Everyone looked at the old man with shocked expressions on their faces. George used to be strong and energetic, but now he looked like an old man. His back was stooped. The wrinkles on his face were unprecedentedly deep and old. He was wearing a fur coat which made him look even thinner. Father! Mark hurriedly came forward. George looked at him and sighed. He reached out and patted the back of Dudien's hand. Child, do you remember what I told you before? If you are knocked down by the enemy's fist, then use your sword to stab back. The future of the family is in your hands. Mark's complexion changed. Father, this is my negligence. It's my fault. I will bear the responsibility, I'm old. George quietly looked at him. His eyes swept across the audience and saw the faces of the younger generation. He smiled and said, When people get old, it's time to die. Moreover, this small matter won't kill me. You are all my good children. You have to work harder in the future, understand? Chapter 4:11. Is the fireplace on fire? Dean tightened the blanket and put his hands into the sweater. He asked Crone, who was next to him. Crone saw that Dudien was shivering in the cold. He replied, Master, the fireplace is burning. Would you like to sit by the fireplace? Dean frowned but silently nodded. He got up and went to the fireplace next to the sofa. Crone took the animal fur blanket and patted it on the sofa. Dean sat down after the blanket was laid out. The fire in the fireplace crackled, and the warm light shone on his face, but he still felt that his whole body was bone-chilling cold, and he couldn't help but feel a little worried. Black snowflakes were falling from the sky outside the window. The snowflakes were mixed with radiation particles. The speed of the snowflakes was relatively fast as they hit the ground and the window. The door was pushed open. Artemis timidly came in. She looked at Crone. "Master, did you call me?" Although she was only 4 or 5 years old, the hardships of childhood made her more sensible than other children of the same age. Coupled with Dean's teaching these days, she also learned to call Dean like other people in the castle. Dean nodded and beckoned her to come over. Artemis was nervous as she slowly came in front of Dean. Dean reached out and touched her green hair. He had never seen such a hair color in the outer wall. Civilians had brown or black hair, while nobles had blonde or pale gold hair. Such a unique hair color was extremely rare. He whispered, "Have you finished today's homework?" "I'm done," Artemis answered honestly, her voice crisp and tender. Dean nodded and sat her on his lap. "What story do you want to listen to today?" Artemis blinked her bright eyes and felt a little relieved. She knew that this big brother was the most gentle when he was telling a story. He would never get angry, but he seemed to be a different person when he was telling a story. She tilted her head and thought for a while. "I still want to hear the story of the ugly duckling from last time." Dean smiled. "I have finished the story of the ugly duckling. Today I will tell you the story of Snow White. Do you want to hear it?" "Snow White?" Artemis blinked. Wasn't the snow black? How could there be white snow? Crone was quietly waiting next to Dudian, but his ears were pricked up. He liked the stories told by Dudian and admired him. Dudian was a friend of the same age, but he knew more than him. "The snow is white." Dean smiled. "In a distant place where the snow is white." The story began in that place. There was a... Dudian's soft voice echoed in the room as the black snow fell on the window. The firewood in the fireplace cracked. Time passed unknowingly. Artemis sat in Dean's arms and listened obediently. She didn't interrupt Dean's words like other little girls who would interrupt Dean's words to ask questions. Redmayne looked at Dean in admiration. "Master is not only great in the field of divinity, but also has the strength of a knight. I really admire you." Dean said goodbye to Redmayne and rode away with Alva. They rode for more than an hour before arriving at the Knight's Hall. "Master, please." Alva led the way. Dean kept up with him. The Knight's Hall was as majestic as ever. It was like a huge square with a high dome. The walls were embedded with wall lamps and crystals. It was extremely luxurious and simple. It didn't have the vulgarity of gold and jade, but exuded nobility and sacredness. "This is the sealed platform." Alva led Dean to a hall. There was a huge circular platform in the middle of the hall. Outside the circular platform was a circle of seats. Currently, there were 12 figures sitting around it. All of them were wearing knight armor and had knight medals on them. Behind these 12 figures, there were 3 figures sitting on a higher level of seat. They were 2 golden knights, and the one in the middle was an old man wearing bright golden armor. He had an extremely thick white beard. "Dean, please come to the platform," the white-bearded old man said. His majestic voice spread throughout the hall. Dean came to the center of the round platform along the narrow aisle. The white-bearded old man deeply looked at Dudian. "I swear." "We swear." The 12 knights around him shouted in unison. "Humble, courteous, upright." The white-bearded old man recited loudly. Every time he recited a sentence, the 12 knights around him would recite a sentence as well. The majestic code of chivalry reverberated in the hall, causing the walls to echo loudly. After a moment, the white-bearded old man finished reciting. He pulled out his sword, stood up from his seat, and walked down the stairs step by step. He came to Dean and said, "Are you willing to accept the knight's mission?" Dean knelt on one knee, bowed his head and said, "I'm willing to accept." The white-bearded old man pressed the sword on his shoulder and said, "Swear." Dean took a deep breath. With a solemn expression, he sonorously swore, "I, Dean, swear that I will follow the knight's code of conduct all my life, humility, integrity, compassion, heroism, justice, sacrifice, glory, soul. The knight's code is my code. I swear I will treat the weak well. Enslave them. I swear I will bravely fight against the ruthlessness of the asterisk 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 asterisk. I swear I will fight against all wrong. Reflection. I swear I will fight for the unarmed. Use. I swear I will help anyone who asks me for help. Valuable. I swear I will not hurt any woman. Will not provoke me. I swear I will help my brother knight. Bribe. I swear I will be sincere to my friends. Surface. I swear I will love until death. The oath echoed in the hall. After a moment the oath ended. The white-bearded old man took back his sword and stretched out his hand. Dean took his hand and stood up. It wasn't a sign of help, but a symbol of inheritance. At this time, 2 golden knights came over with a new set of golden knight's armor and a golden knight's sword. They handed over to Dean. The white-bearded old man took out a knight's medal from his hand. It wasn't a golden knight's medal but a bright gold one. The edge of the medal was inlaid with crystal diamonds. It was the highest level Crystal Knight medal of the Knight's Hall. Crystal Knight was the highest glory of a knight. It symbolized flawlessness and purity. From today onwards, you are a golden knight of the Knight Hall. The white-bearded old man seriously looked at Dean. But in view of your excellent performance, we will make an exception to give you a Crystal Knight medal. You will have most of the privileges and treatment of a Crystal Knight. We will replace your armor once you become a Crystal Knight. Do you understand? Dean nodded. I understand. The white-bearded old man nodded and handed over the medal to Dean. Chapter 4:12. Dean left the Knight's Hall and rode back to the castle after he heard about the origin of the knight profession and the rights he had at his disposal. He didn't know who leaked the news, but a large number of newspaper staff had gathered outside the castle. The scene was very crowded and there were some disturbances. Dean felt that his body was freezing. His face was pale, but he didn't slow down as he rode straight back to the castle. Noyce, who was guarding the entrance of the castle, saw Dean from afar. He saw that Dean didn't slow down, so he opened the door to let him enter. The newspaper staff didn't dare to stop Dean as they saw him galloping. They just waited for Dean to enter. Noyce quickly closed the door and ordered everyone to retreat. The horse galloped through the manor and gradually stopped in front of the castle gate. Dean dismounted from the horse. He could not help but shiver slightly. He took a deep breath and rubbed his hands. Crone took out the blanket that was previously draped over Dean and wrapped it around him. When Dean stepped into the castle, he staggered and almost fell. His face was pale, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The blood was pitch black and exuded a strong stench. His vision was blurred, and he hurriedly ordered before he fell, "Don't look for a doctor." He fainted before he finished his words. Crone hurried to support him, but he only had one arm, so he couldn't hold him. Gwyneth, who was dressed as a maid, rushed over and hugged Dean. She saw that Dean didn't respond, so she touched his eyelids. She frowned as she carried Dean and walked upstairs. At the same time she looked at Crone. "Don't leak the news. Tell the people outside to get out of here." Crone reacted and quickly turned to go out. "I'll go," Nicholas said, his hunched back straightening, giving off a dignified air. Crone saw this and quickly turned to go upstairs. Gwyneth kicked open Dean's study room and carried him to the sofa by the fireplace. She looked at Crone. "Add some firewood to the fireplace. He might be cold." Crone reacted and ran away in a hurry. But he remembered that he only had one arm and there were only a few of them in the castle. The servants were dismissed by Dean. The only idle person was Sergei. It was cold. Gwyneth touched Dean's left arm. She felt as if she was touching an ice cube. She was surprised. Previously, when she carried Dean upstairs, she felt that his body temperature was not normal. It was so cold that it was prickling her hand. She reached out and touched Dean's forehead. It was warm. Then she touched his neck artery. It was slow and cold. She reached out and touched Dean's chest. It felt like touching ice. "It's so cold." Gwyneth was surprised. His body temperature was so low, but he was still alive. It was incredible. She thought of the legendary magic mark that Dean had obtained, and her heart was moved. But on second thought, the legendary magic mark had already taken root in Dean's body. Even if it was taken out, it could not be used again. The touch of excitement in her heart suddenly calmed down. She frowned and pondered. Among the possibilities that she could think of, Dean's low body temperature could only be caused by the legendary magic mark. Was this the side effect of the legendary magic marks? Or was it something else? While she was lost in thought, Sergei and Crone brought firewood and lit it in the fireplace. Sergei gave the job of lighting the fire to Crone. He looked at Dean and then looked at Gwyneth. Did he really faint? Nothing big happened, right? Did you get attacked on the way back? Gwyneth replied, he didn't have any injuries. Maybe he was poisoned. He ate or drank something. Gwyneth slightly shook her head. Do you think he'll eat other people's food? Especially after the hot soup incident. Even if the Knight's Hall gave him something, he might not eat it, right? Sergei felt that it was reasonable. If that's not the case, then is it a relapse of an old disease? He turned to Crone. Do you know what old disease he has? Maybe we should write a letter and ask old Foulene. Crone lit the firewood. He thought for a moment. He didn't know that Dean had left the orphanage. Perhaps only Patriarch Foulene knew about Dean. He immediately said, Okay, I'll write a letter to inform him. Gwyneth suddenly said, Wait. Sergei, huh? Gwyneth turned to look at him. If it is a relapse of an old disease, then Patriarch Foulene shouldn't know about it. Otherwise he would have asked us to inform him before he fainted. If we rashly inform Patriarch Foulene, then the enemy might have planted an informant under his eyes. Wouldn't the news be exposed? He told us not to find a doctor because he doesn't want the news to spread out. Sergei shrugged. What's there to be afraid of? Who would dare to attack us? I'll kill them. Gwyneth coldly looked at him. Are you sure that you are the #1 master in the outer wall? Sergei was startled. His face changed as he closed his mouth. Let's wait for him to wake up. Gwyneth said, During this time we can't leak any information. Tell the newspaper staff to shut up. Don't they want to interview the young master about his knighthood? Pass the news to the New World News. Crone hesitated. This. If we don't say anything, then it will inevitably cause speculation and continue to peep. Gwyneth said, We can't hide this matter. If he wakes up and wants to blame me, then let him blame me. Crone thought for a moment. All right. Sergei looked at Dean after Crone left. He pinched Dean's face. Wow, so cold. Sergei retracted his hand and looked at Gwyneth. Is he dead? How come his body is colder than a dead person? Colder than a dead person means that he isn't dead. Gwyneth coldly said. Sergei looked at her strangely. Do you think that he is pretending to be dead to test us? Gwyneth indifferently said, I don't rule out such a possibility. You can try. Sergei shrugged his shoulders. I won't try. It won't do us any good even if he dies. Anyway, I don't see anyone in the outer wall who is more valuable than him. Well, Gwyneth coldly snorted in disdain. Sergei laughed. Isn't it? If you want to go to the inner wall, then you can only rely on him. If you go to other consortiums, then you will be treated as a chess piece. After all, we have fought together. Even if we don't have love, we should at least have friendship. Don't be so cold to me. I can only be ruthless to you. Gwyneth indifferently replied. Sergei shrugged his shoulders as he didn't care. The temperature in the room rose as the flames in the fireplace got warmer and warmer. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye. Dean slowly opened his eyes. He felt as if his body was immersed in a bath that was half cold and half warm. He felt uncomfortable. His stomach was churning and he wanted to vomit. His head was dizzy and painful. He couldn't think as he reluctantly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Artemis's delicate face. Dean's heart was inexplicably warm. He didn't know why he had such a feeling. He looked up and saw Gwyneth and Gabriel sitting on the sofa. "Master, you woke up." Artemis was surprised to see Dean wake up. Several people in the room were surprised and rushed over. Chapter 4:14. He saw that under the skin layer of the abdomen there was a layer of hardened crystals. The color of the crystals was dark red like frozen blood. At the moment it was like an armor covering the skin layer. At first glance it seemed that the skin layer was just a set of soft clothes. Dean was startled, and there was a feeling of horror in his scalp. Young master. Crone's body trembled in fear. Jura's eyes were full of shock and confusion. She was stunned on the spot. Dean recovered and looked at her. "What is this disease?" Jura turned around and looked at him. Her eyes were full of confusion. She had never seen such a strange scene in her entire life. Under the skin layer was a hardened blood clot. Moreover, this blood clot was not an ordinary hardened blood clot. Its surface was extremely smooth. The most surprising thing was that there were orderly undulating lines on it like scales. But the strangest thing was that the owner of the body was still alive in such a situation. "I don't know." Jura looked down at the dark red crystals in front of her fingers. There was a complex look on her face. "It should be because your body temperature is too low which caused the blood to harden, but..." She didn't know what to say. She didn't dare to blindly diagnose a disease that she had never seen before. After all, she only had one life. Even if she inferred that it was due to the body temperature, she didn't know how to solve it. Dean's heart sank as he saw her expression. "Is there no way?" Jura slightly gritted her teeth. "I'll try." She held the scalpel to expand the area of the skin layer. However, the skin layer outside the small intestine was cut open. It was full of dark red crystals. She tried to touch it gently but found that it was extremely cold and hard. She even suspected that the knife may not be able to pierce through the strange hardened blood. "Auntie, is there no way to treat it?" Crone, who was next to her, gradually adapted. He looked at Jura's bewildered appearance and said anxiously and nervously. Cold sweat oozed out of Jura's forehead. She hesitated for a moment. "This thing must be removed. It may be a little painful. You have to endure it." Dean took a deep breath. "You try first." "I'll try to endure it." Jura nodded as she stared at Dean's abdomen. She found an edge and slowly stabbed the scalpel. The scalpel stabbed into the hardened blood. It was like stabbing eyes. It made a very shallow mark. Dean saw the veins on her wrist gradually bulging. He knew that she had exerted a lot of strength. The hardness of the hardened blood was much harder than he had imagined. Although Jura was an ordinary person, but her strength was not small. But she couldn't pierce through the hardened blood. How could he cut it? Jura's strength gradually increased to about 70% or 80%, reaching the limit of her strength, but she still couldn't cut open the hardened blood. She couldn't help but loosen her hand and exhale. Her wrist was sore, but there was some fear and confusion in her heart. Something suddenly flashed in her mind. She was startled and turned to look at Dean. The confusion in her eyes gradually turned into fear, and finally into self-blame and pain. Dean saw the sudden change in her appearance. He felt a trace of bad. "Auntie, is this disease incurable?" Jura's eyes turned red. Tears fell down. "I have read in a medical book that there is a similar disease. It is extremely rare. There are very few people who have gotten such a rare disease since the birth of the giant wall." Dean's heart sank. "What is this disease?" "Ice blood disease." Jura lowered her head. There was a crying tone in her voice. "All the people who got ice blood disease eventually died. It is a rare terminal disease." Dean's heart sank. Terminal disease. This was tantamount to hearing that he had cancer. It was an instant despair. After his heart beat violently twice, the throbbing in the bottom of his heart gradually calmed down. In the old era, many cancers could be treated with the development of medical technology. The so-called terminal illness was just an illness that couldn't be cured in the medical field of a certain era. since the ice blood disease was a terminal illness that couldn't be cured with the current medical conditions, he might be able to find a cure by relying on the knowledge in the superchip. Dean was silent for a moment. He looked at the crying Jura. Auntie, thank you. Help me sew it. Jura was already sobbing. Hearing Dean's words, she bit her lips and held back her sobs, but tears still rolled down from her eyes. She gritted her teeth and took out a needle and thread to sew Dean's skin layer. Her handwork was very delicate and the sewing was seamless. Dean quietly looked at her. After she finished, he asked, Auntie, how long can I live with this disease? Jura's body slightly trembled as she bowed her head. The records are not detailed, but it should not be long, and… She looked up at Dean. This disease is infectious. During this period you better not drink with others. In addition, it is best not to let the Holy Church know that you have such a disease, otherwise you will be arrested and isolated. Infectious disease? Crone's face turned pale. He instinctively took a step back. Dean glanced at Crone. He looked at Jura. I know. Annie, you go back first. Don't mention this to anyone. If someone asks you, just say that it's just a cold. Jura burst into tears. I'll stay and take care of you. Dean's face became indifferent. Crone, pay the medical fee and send the guest out. Crone had a complex expression as he pulled Jura out of the room. Dean slowly closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them again. His eyes were cold. He waited for Crone to come back. Give me the medical books in the bookcase. Crone was startled but immediately went over to help him. Dean put a pillow on his back and began to read the medical books that he had brought back from the library. He was busy learning the knowledge from the superchip, so he didn't have time to read these books. The name ice blood disease was obviously the name of this era. Perhaps there was such a disease in the old era, but the name was different. He wanted to know the cause of this disease and what the final outcome would be. He flipped through the books one by one. Suddenly, Dean stopped at a certain page of an old medical book. This was the autobiography of an old doctor from hundreds of years ago. On a snowy day, he was invited by an aristocrat to go out to see a patient. The patient was a squire of the aristocrat family. The patient's body temperature was extremely low. After the initial diagnosis, the doctor decided to directly perform surgery to delay the squire's life. But after the operation, the doctor found that the servant's arm had long been frozen. The ice crystals were like fish scales and there were progressive wavy lines. Ice blood disease. There was a trace of dignified look in Dean's eyes. The hardened blood under his abdomen had extremely regular lines. It was as if it was carefully carved by a carving knife. It was very similar to the servant from hundreds of years ago. The operation failed and I was driven out of the aristocrat's house. Later I mentioned the matter to my friend. Soon I heard that the Holy Church had sent people to search the aristocrat's house and arrested the sick servant. Dean carefully read line by line. From the description above, the Holy Church mentioned that the servant was suffering from a disease called ice blood disease. The name of this disease actually came from the Radiant Church? Dean was surprised. He thought that it was invented by the doctors. He didn't expect the Holy Church to take the lead in calling it out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.